Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. Welcome into our latest Traded Black podcast. Big show here today. We got one of the regional OGs of this industry, one of the biggest names in this space, former NBA basketball player and CEO of Viola Brands, Al Harrington, is going to be joining us in just a moment. Going to talk a little bit about his partnership with Avicanna, a company that we've been having on the last couple of months with Aras Azadian, making some big headways, this company, as they have some really good knowledge on really understanding the science and medical side of cannabis. And really, when we look outside of cannabis rescheduling, what happens next? Aras has been instrumental in really driving that force and educating all of us on what the necessary steps the U.S. is going to need to do. So an interesting partnership as we bring in these two. But first up, let's bring in AV here on a Thursday. Good to see you. How are things?
How's it going? Good. I'm pumped to get into this one. I mean, I saw Viola come onto the scene back in, I think, 2011.
Yeah.
And it was good because, I mean, they made waves. Al was one of the first NBA stars and athletes to really own cannabis and enter the space. It was a big moment for the industry.
Yes. Let's bring in the CEO of Avicanna, Mr. Aras Azadian, back to the podcast. Good to see you. And we got to thank you. You're the man that set this all up. How are things?
Doing well. Yeah. I'm in Colombia enjoying the good weather, and I'm happy to be back on with you guys.
Yeah, you just before we got going, you showed us the view, and cannot believe the cost of living down there. But it sounds like you're a little bit smarter than the average Canadian, because that's the place to be, it looks like, right?
Especially during winter, Canadian winters.
You think? Yeah. Well, with that, let's welcome in former NBA star and now CEO of Viola Brands. I shouldn't say now. He's been around for a long time. One of the biggest names in the overall space, Al Harrington. You know, we've heard a lot about you, and finally, we get a chance to get you on the podcast. Good to meet you. How are things?
Everything's great, man. Nice to meet you guys as well, man. Heard a lot about your show. Aras is always raving about, you know what I'm saying, working with you guys. So excited.
That's great. And I hear you're from Dallas, Texas. We got some news about some movement in Dallas that's interesting to see on the state level. But how are people, I guess, interpreting cannabis? Are they changing their outlook on how they view it?
Well, correction, I'm not from Dallas. I'm from New Jersey. Very proud
so
of that.
In Dallas.
I just live in Dallas. Yeah, but yeah, the environment down here in Dallas specifically is obviously everybody here is very conservative and stuff like that. So, haven't seen much movement. You see smoke shops allowing like Delta Eats and the HHCAs and all those different cannabinoids or whatever. But I think that over time there will be some changes. You know what I'm saying? And hopefully I'll be spearheading that, being that I'm down here. But just overall, I just see in the industry, man, I see that it's still growing. Obviously that a lot of people take a lot of lumps, bumps, and bruises. I think that's happened in every industry that's come from being unregulated to regulated. Founders are the ones that have the arrows in their back. I have a few, but but at the end of the day, we've been able to continue. They stay the course and continue to grow and continue to, allow people to have access to this wonderful plant.
Yeah. Well, good for you. And I know you've been around a long time, built probably one of the biggest brands in the overall space. But over the last, say, like 12, 13, 14 years that you've been involved in this space, I know it's a pretty broad question and probably difficult to pinpoint one thing. But where are we at in this space? And what is there anything that's really grabbed you by surprise as to how much this industry has evolved since you first got in?
Honestly, I mean, nothing's really surprised me, man. I will just say, like, in my journey, I never thought that, what is it now, 14 years later, I'd still be doing this, right? And doing it at this level. I mean, when I first started, it was something that was very, taboo. I wasn't, I couldn't talk about it like this in these type of forums and platforms. But, as time has went on, we've seen just so much growth and so much more opportunity in the space. And, being that I was a former athlete, my first thing was really about changing the stigma around cannabis. And, I've been able to work with guys like, God rest in peace, David Stern, to raise the awareness that the benefits of cannabis just for athletes specifically.
Yeah.
Right. And then we all know about all the other people, especially my grandmother, who really inspired me to get into the space, and why we call our company Viola, which is her namesake, allowing people to have, access to this plant for medicinal purposes. And then obviously we've seen it's grown from a recreational standpoint as well.
Yeah, it's great. Go ahead, Anthony.
I was going to say, seeing like, I know the NBA, the NFL, they've relaxed their testing standards as it relates to cannabis. I mean, they have a long ways to go. Do you see them in the near future athletes being able to actually use cannabis as a therapeutic and a means of recovery? within their day-to-day regimens?
So, obviously that's still, I think they're waiting for like federal legalization or something for the federally before, they allow players to, use it on that scale, right? And with that type of, recognition or whatever. But right now, the NBA doesn't test anymore for it at all. I think the NFL still tests, but there's no real penalty for if you do test positive for it or whatever. So all 4 major sports here in the United States have had some type of programming that has now allowed players to have access to it. And the beauty of that is, like, there's some players like the Kevin Durant's and stuff like that have come out and said that they use cannabis, right? And look at the quality of play, right? It didn't drop off at all. So, and historically, we were always taught that if you use cannabis, it was a gateway drug to, end your life, essentially. But, we see some of the world's greatest athletes, you know what I'm saying, using cannabis and still performing at a super high level. So, I think that, these things will eventually change. But I think from an athletic standpoint, I think we're on the way. I think the last thing we're waiting for now is the Olympics.
Yeah, good point. Well, look, we all know for everything to have the day in the sun, so to speak, when that time does come, and we are getting it in some ways, but it's got to be legitimized at the regulated level, and it's all about science and research, Aras. Talk to me, like, how did this whole partnership with Al come together? How'd you guys meet?
We met a couple of years ago now, and it was based on that. It was based on getting the evidence and the science so that we can give, Al the tools that he needs to go make these movements that he's been able to do, right? Which is get the the NBA Players Association on board and get more endorsements and get more, let's say, legitimization of cannabinoid-based medicine. And as you guys know, I always talk about it. In Canada, we're able to do a lot of the research in the US you can't, right? And 4 years ago, where we started this, for example, one of our collaborations, which was Replay, there was probably like 15,000 CBD topical brands in the market, and they were all, non-functional. There was no evidence.
15,000. Wow.
There's thousands, right? And it was a very fragmented sort of market. It still is, but there's no differentiation. And, I think CBD topicals is an easy product that you can sell nationwide in many ways. But if the products don't work, people are just not going to try them again.
Right.
And people are taking, Vaseline creams and sprinkling a little bit of CBD on it and calling it a topical. And that's not what I think is going to require to get proper validation and credibility behind these products. And Al brings that from the market and from a community perspective, and we brought it from a science perspective. So the combination and the relationship really started from that. And then, I'm involved in the Canadian market, obviously on the medical side. And we realized that, we don't have a minority brand or a brand that represents, social equity and diversity in Canada. We didn't have such a brand. So we collaborated and brought his Viola brand and extended that vision into Canada as well, which has been actually quite successful in the Canadian market. So it's been a partnership, relationship, but it's grown into a friendship. And, we've, traveled. Al's been down here to Colombia. We've had some fun out here as well, but it's been a journey. And I think we're just getting started, as a world and the international markets open up. I think we're going to be tackling that together.
Yeah, that's for sure.
You mentioned the NBA, I guess, I don't want to say stamping their seal of approval, but I guess endorsing the Replay product to a certain degree. Am I assuming that is a THC-free product and it's a CBD and minor cannabinoid, let's say topical, to be used in recovery?
Yeah, exactly. So the Replay brand is Al's sort of wellness recovery brand. And the idea or the vision he had there was, can athletes avoid anti-inflammatory meds and painkillers, for, muscle recovery, muscle injury. And we had this, deep tissue technology that's now patented, and we've done a ton of clinical trials on it that proves we actually deliver the cannabinoids into the muscles and joints. And we've had results on a number of different pain indications. So we brought that technology to the table. And then Al, with his, again, relationship and credibility, was able to go to the NBA Players Association.
Right.
We were able to build that collaboration with them. And of course, we had to show the evidence, the data, but as you pointed it out, Anthony, we had to make sure that the products are THC free.
Yeah. So how, Al, I got to ask, having that relationship, having played, we always talk about trust being a big thing. We look at this industry right now, to Aras's point, 15,000 different brands on shelves. We don't know what it is, what's inside the product. Safety and efficacy is an important one, but have you spoken to many players as far as the Players Association? What's been the feedback so far?
Yeah, so I started with first the retired players. because those are the guys that are really beat up, right?
I bet.
And I would almost say those are our guinea pigs that we actually tried a lot of different formulations with, got a lot of positive feedback from them before we decided to come with our final formulation. So, and even myself, I had over 15 surgeries in my career.
15.
Right.
Wow.
So I'm pretty banged up. I'm actually dealing with a little neck thing right now. So I got Replay like plastered all through the back of my head, down my middle.
Suit him up. He's ready to go.
So Liz, and I'm feeling good, right? That's why I'm on the phone with you guys smiling. But yes, talking to some of the current players, and at the end of the day, like what I tell, like my story with this was like, throughout my career, I dealt with a lot of injuries, and there was a time for literally 7 straight seasons that I took an anti-inflammatory called Celebrex, right? And long term, we don't know what that's gonna do to my body. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know what that did to my body yet, right? But being that when I found CBD and found topicals and just found the cannabis plant and found that there was alternative ways to medicate myself that was safer, way more safer, it just made a lot of sense. You know what I'm saying? And the pressures that we feel as like first time generational wealth in a lot of our families, right? We kind of got to do whatever it takes to get out there on the court. You know what I'm saying? Whether even when we're putting our long-term health on the line. So, I've just been really just, steadfast on just trying to figure out ways that I could, help other athletes be able to medicate themselves and deal with a lot of the ailments that they deal with in a healthier way. Yeah, and so that's been really a focus of mine of just definitely creating products that can help these athletes deal with the pain that they're dealing with in the moment, but also be able to have a great quality of life after.
For sure.
How, as it relates to plant medicine and as it relates to cannabinoid-based therapies, how receptive are players to them, both past and present, and how hard is it to educate, let's say, the team physicians on using things such as plant-based medicines versus the traditional alternatives, such as like a Celebrex or anti-inflammatories that they're very used to prescribing and comfortable using?
Well, with the players, man, I mean, they I always say, even for me, like my whole career, I always was on a quest of trying to figure out how to feel better, right? Trying to replay my youth, right? Which is kind of where we will play on Replay, right? I just wanted to feel like the best version of myself. I wanted to feel like the 20-year-old Al as much as I could, right? So I think that's for all athletes, right? Because the better we feel, the longer we play, the longer money we make, the longer careers, the whole thing, right? So I think for the players, always looking for that. I think that with the doctors and stuff like that, a lot of times, man, like, I feel like it's a little bit of ignorance from the standpoint that a lot of times they only want to focus on the studies.
Yes.
100 years ago, right? It's like we have 100 years of research study on this, but I'm like, but that study, it started at 1 year, right? So when are we going to start at that 1 year for cannabis and for cannabinoids and for for this alternative medication that we're saying that is actually working for us? So a lot of times, I can only talk as a layman man, right? So a lot of times I have to call in Aras or some of our scientists to be able to really, back me up on a lot of this stuff. So I'll let Aras maybe touch on that as well. But that's kind of where it starts.
Are you on mute, Aras?
Sorry, and I think you have the pioneer doctors, like in Canada we have like the likes of Dr. Hans Clark. Al, you've met him a few times, pain specialist, very well world renowned, and he's open to this and he's studying cannabinoids for pain. And I think once, for example, we wrap up those studies, I can take those study packages and Al and I can go talk to the various leagues and various team doctors. But sometimes you might get the team doctors that are actually open to running studies too. Like we had some preliminary conversations, Al and I, with the Raptors. We didn't sort of follow through on that, but that was an idea where we said, why don't we test Replay on some of because that's Canada, right? Toronto. We can test the products and see if we can lower the anti-inflammatory meds. And Al, if you recall, the team doctor was open to that. So there's a chance. It's not a hard no, but I think we have to come back with the evidence or come back with the opportunity to create the evidence and see if we can do that in a collaborative sense with some of these more stubborn doctors.
How long ago was that when you approached the doctor? Because let's face it, 6 months in this industry changes a lot.
It was like Al 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was about to. It was right. It was out of COVID, so like maybe 21, maybe. This was a little bit longer than that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a little bit longer.
But he was receptive, and Masai was receptive. So there's been opportunities. And I think, again, it's on us. The onus is on us to go and generate the evidence, and we have been. So on these topical products, for example, we conducted a 100-patient study where we looked at inflammatory pain, local pain, surgical pain, post-surgical pain. Like, all these studies are now starting to give us a little bit more ammo, and I think as we progress, we have to do that work on the backside, which is what we do. And then Al will have some of those bullets to go into these arguments and just kind of put that on the table. And I think with CBD-based products, and I would argue CBG as well. So CBG is showing some really interesting signals from a pain perspective. If we can go with these let's say, psychoactive or, not THC products, I think we have an easier route. And they're naturally, people are going to be more susceptible to, tolerating and accepting a topical non-psychoactive product over, the THC joint, right? So step by step, and I think that's what I like about like our partnership with Al and the team, because with Replay, it's a very different type of products. It's a very different approach. Replay, we can internationalize immediately, where with Viola is going to go towards more the lifestyle sort of form, and it's going to, as more and more countries legalize. And I think Viola's going to have a different route.
I got to ask, when we look at, I don't want to get into whole cannabis reform talk, but we hear a lot of politicians when we go to Washington that come see us once cannabis is actually rescheduled, that they'll look at it in a different light. How much do you think cannabis rescheduling, and a question for both of you, and Aras, I'll begin with you, but the way a lot of these leagues will look at cannabinoids, yes, you have to have the research, you have to have the data, but do you think rescheduling helps in any kind of way pertaining to it?
For sure. I think, not just the leagues, but all other institutions, from all healthcare institutions to investment institutions, everyone's waiting for this bigger kind of, bucket to drop. And I think once that happens, people are going to feel less of a risk to proceed. Yeah. And I think what everyone is not realizing is, waiting for that particular moment, or waiting for bureaucracy essentially, is putting a risk out there, and I think the risk is physicians are saying no to cannabinoid-based medicine. The market has opened up to allowing these crazy synthetic cannabinoids that are really not well studied from a safety perspective. That's okay. You can buy some weird derivative of THC that might be hallucinogenic. You can buy that, but do not, buy a very well studied Delta-9 product that, that can cross the border. So it's a very unique situation, I think, the U.S. market's in, because, the market wants to adopt cannabinoid-based products so badly that they keep finding loopholes in commercializing products. Yeah. I think the risk of that is higher than actually federally legalizing.
Al, you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I agree with him. I think that, to this point, it is all around the risk factor, right? That's the issue that, a lot of people they're not willing to take that risk at this point. And then to your point with the doctors, if you're not forcing them to do the clinical trials and studies, they're just not willing to do it. So once those things fall and the regulations change, I think it'll open it up. And honestly, obviously they'll turn this into a pharmaceutical, drug or whatever, and then we'll just kind of have to see where the chips fall at that point.
Yeah.
Is that the long-term strategy for something like Replay? Like, start with sports medicine, specialized use cases, and then go mass market? To where people are using it on a day-to-day basis for pain and certain other indications?
For sure. I mean, it's funny, like when we look at our database of like our users, we actually, it's more older people that buy Replay than actually the athletes, believe it or not. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's definitely ready for that.
So it makes you feel better. Does it help 48-year-old dads that have a journey just tying their shoes?
Yes, everything.
That's our key segment. That's one of our key target audiences.
But I always says this. I'm sure it's a key demographic. I'm sure it's a key demographic too for Viola, is people that are looking for sleep and pain. In that older demographic, that's a lot of the cannabis users, from a medicinal and a recreational perspective.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we see that from a medicinal standpoint. That is one of the leading reasons why people actually use cannabis, for sure.
Yeah.
I think we did a recent survey from our patients in Canada, and I think about 40% were using for some, whether only or in combination for other comorbidities, cannabinoid-based products for sleep. So sleep is by far the biggest indication.
Yeah.
Then it's pain and anxiety, and we've seen that trend in other studies, but we are practically seeing that with tens of thousands of patients. So those are more symptom management, you know, and I agree with Al. There's going to be a pharmaceutical, very specific drug, you know, for glaucoma, you know, referencing Grandma Al and others, but there's also going to be this like general medical cannabis category, which is like symptom management, you know, kind of like how you have an Advil. There's various things that you take an Advil for. I think that's what we will see cannabis used for, you know, anxiety, pain, sleep, things like that are going to be more commonly used. For sure, there's an angle there. And I think the fact that, for example, with Replay, this is backed by, you know, a professional athlete and his legacy and, you know, the league, I think just gives people a little bit of credibility and comfort because they know the product's not going to be some garbage they buy in a convenience store that was made in a bathtub, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to bypass.
Yeah. Well, the more research, it's curious to see how it'll do mentally. Like as far as the concussion protocol that has basically ravaged the NFL community over the past 10 years, you see kickoffs and the major rules that are changing and some of the helmets that they're now wearing. That is a huge thing right now. But do you think in due time with the proper research, we will have findings that, I don't want to say cures concussions and anybody who suffers from that, but will help towards basically people's lifestyle in the event that they play, let's say, in the NFL and have suffered numerous concussions?
Yeah, I think there was a study that was announced by the NFL actually with a Canadian university. They actually recently reached out to us. They're studying concussions for the NFL, but it's ironic because they're studying it in Canada. Like they figured out this whole thing where it's the place to do the studies, you know. So I think it's more of a, you know, sort of post-treatment option potentially for lowering inflammation.
Yeah.
You know, but one of our neuroscientists, Dr. Urban, she's an expert at concussions, and her and I have been talking about this a lot. There's certainly going to be an opportunity to look at it. And I think what people are forgetting is it's not just CBD and THC, guys. There's a lot of different cannabinoids, and they act very differently, specifically in the brain. You know, so we're currently, like, I'm in Colombia, we're currently growing CBGV, CBDV, THCV. We don't really know what these things can do yet, right? So imagine once we can do more and more research on all these rare cannabinoids that potentially can have different efficacy for these different indications.
Yeah, that's great. So any company has to have a vision where they want to see this go, but where do you envision this as far as a commercialization standpoint for the both of you? And Al, like, is there, outside of you, like, do you have other players, whether they're current or retired players, that'll help, I guess, with the overall word spreading? I see a lot of stuff like Steven Jackson talk about cannabis from time to time on his podcast, but it seems like it is gaining some momentum, and the stigma around it obviously is changing.
Yeah, definitely. I got a full team of warriors, you know, ready to, you know, attack this for sure. You know, a lot of these guys actually invested in the company as well. You know, we have a bunch of current players, we have a bunch of retired players as well. So, you know, as we're gonna relaunch this summer at All Star. And we're going to use a lot of these guys with our relaunch to continue to raise the awareness and to continue to give credibility to the product because they're all users of the product as well.
At the summer camp in Vegas this summer.
Yep. Summer league.
Well, listen, always love like learning, and gotta hand it to you. You know, you have one of the largest cannabis brands in the U.S. in Viola. What's that mean to you?
It means a lot, man. You know, it really means a lot just because of like the reason why I did it, right? You know, a lot of people kind of, you know, got into the space just because they saw an opportunity to make money and different things like that. I really got into it because I saw the medicinal benefits. I realized that my whole youth I had been being lied to in all my adult years. And, you know, realizing that this is an alternative way to medicate people and give people a better quality of life the way it did my then 79-year-old grandmother when she had her first interaction with cannabis until the day that she passed. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
So it means a lot that we continue to, you know, push the ball forward, especially when I've seen so many people around me not make it, right? So it just means a lot, and hopefully we continue to take this brand not only domestically but also globally, which we've done in Canada and, you know, a couple other countries, and we're just going to continue to grow the business.
Yeah, it's great. Job well done on the partnership. Aras, I appreciate you hooking this interview up with us, and onwards and upwards, guys, and I wish you the best of luck, and let's keep in touch, okay?
Thanks guys.
All right.
Thanks,
I really
so much.
appreciate it.
Take care. Hey everyone, thanks for watching our latest podcast. What'd you all think? Is there any information that we're missing? Is there anything you want us to cover? As these industries heat up, we're getting access to more and more big hosts. So let us know the questions that you want us to ask for you. As usual, smash that like button. We want this to go viral. Click on that bell for all notifications for the latest interviews that we're doing. And as usual, let's build this community. Subscribe to our channel because we appreciate it, because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.